The silence in the bedroom was louder than any argument. Sarah lay beside Mark, the familiar rhythm of his breathing a comfort she no longer truly felt. 10 years. 10 years since their first kiss, since the breathless promise of forever. And 10 years since either of them had truly known another's touch. They'd built a life, brick by quiet brick, filled with comfortable routines and unspoken assumptions. But lately, a subtle shift had occurred, a fissure in the foundation of their contentment. It wasn't a sudden crack, more like a slow, creeping erosion, the kind you only notice when the damage is already done. It had started subtly, a joke over dinner, a whispered what if in the dark. The idea of a partner swap, so out of character for them, had somehow taken root. Sarah, usually so cautious, had found herself drawn to the illicit thrill of it, a secret spark of rebellion in her otherwise predictable existence. Mark, ever the agreeable one, had seemed equally intrigued. It wasn't about dissatisfaction with each other, they'd both insisted. It was about exploration, about a shared adventure, a way to reignite a spark that felt dim, not extinguished. Looking back, Sarah realized now it was less about rekindling something and more about a desperate search for something else. The evening itself had been a blur of forced smiles and awkward introductions at a trendy downtown bar. The other couple, Liam and Chloe, were everything Sarah and Mark weren't: boisterous, uninhibited, almost aggressively vibrant. Chloe had laughed easily, her eyes sparkling, while Liam had possessed an intensity that was both unsettling and strangely compelling. Sarah had tried to match their energy, to shed her inhibitions like a too-tight dress, but a part of her remained stubbornly tethered to the familiar. Later, in a borrowed apartment filled with the lingering scent of stale wine and nervous energy, the evening had spiraled into what was supposed to be liberation. But for Sarah, it had been anything but. Liam, for all his initial intensity, had been quick. Too quick. He'd moved with a kind of detached urgency that left her feeling like an object, not a participant. She'd tried, truly, to engage, to find the promised thrill, but her body had remained stubbornly unresponsive, a traitor to her adventurous spirit. The build-up, the anticipation, the sheer audacity of the act, had culminated in a fizzle. A profound, deflating fizzle. Across the room, muffled sounds had drifted from another bedroom, sounds that told a different story. Mark's low chuckle, Chloe's hushed moans. They had gotten off, as Mark had later recounted, almost apologetically. Sarah, however, had been left with nothing but a hollow ache and a gnawing sense of disappointment. It wasn't just the lack of climax, it was the feeling of being inadequate, of failing to rise to the occasion, to show her abilities. The idea, the forbidden fantasy, had been so much grander than the reality. Back home, the next morning, a strange quiet had settled between them. Mark had been tender, asking if she was okay, but his eyes held a hint of concern, a question she couldn't answer. She was okay, she supposed. But she wasn't right. A weird feeling, as she'd called it, had taken root deep within her. It was more than disappointment, it was a profound sense of wrongness, like a piece of a puzzle forced into the wrong spot. Every mundane task felt off-kilter. The taste of her coffee was slightly bitter, the morning news seemed to buzz with a discordant frequency, even the familiar scent of Mark's aftershave felt alien. She tried to shake it off, to attribute it to nerves, to the novelty of the experience. But the feeling persisted, a persistent hum beneath the surface of her consciousness. It was as if the world had subtly shifted on its axis, and she was the only one who noticed. As the days bled into a week, the weird feeling began to coalesce into something more concrete, something almost like a memory. Not a memory she could grasp, but an echo, a faint whisper of a life she couldn't quite recall, yet felt intimately familiar. Sometimes, when she was alone, a fleeting image would flash in her mind, a different cityscape, a different kind of laughter, a different warmth beside her. It was fleeting, elusive, like trying to catch smoke. But it was there, a persistent shadow at the edge of her perception. She dismissed it as fatigue, as stress, as her mind playing tricks on her. Yet, the unease deepened. She found herself staring blankly at her own reflection, wondering if the person staring back was truly herself. Was this her life? Was this her husband? The questions, once absurd, now felt increasingly urgent. One afternoon, while tidying up, her gaze fell upon a framed photograph on their mantelpiece. It was a picture from their honeymoon in Santorini, their arms around each other, grinning into the camera. It was a happy picture, a testament to their decade together. But as she looked at it now, a strange sensation washed over her. It was as if she was looking at two strangers, or perhaps, two actors playing a part. The smile on her face seemed just a touch too wide, Mark's arm around her a fraction too stiff. It was then, standing in her own living room, surrounded by her own life, that a terrifying thought whispered through her mind. What if this isn't my life at all? The idea was so outlandish, so utterly preposterous, yet it resonated with that weird feeling, that persistent echo of something else. The partner swap, she realized, hadn't just exposed a void in her present life. It had seemingly unlocked a door to a past she couldn't remember, a past that felt more real than the ground beneath her feet. The romantic and suspenseful journey had just begun. The weird feeling that had been a subtle hum beneath Sarah's consciousness now intensified into a relentless thrum. It wasn't just a feeling anymore, it was a series of fleeting images, fragmented sensations, and an undeniable sense of déjà vu that went beyond simple familiarity. Her life, once so concrete and predictable, began to feel like a poorly remembered dream. She started seeing things. Not hallucinations, not exactly, but glimpses. A fleeting flash of a vibrant red sports car instead of Mark's sedate sedan in the driveway. The distinct aroma of a different kind of coffee, richer, darker, when she brewed their usual blend. A moment where she almost called Mark by a different name, a name that hovered on the tip of her tongue, foreign yet incredibly intimate. Each instant sent a jolt through her, a cold dread that quickly gave way to a desperate need to understand. Mark noticed her distraction. "Everything okay, honey? You seem a million miles away sometimes." He'd reach for her hand, his touch familiar, yet now, unsettlingly so. A strange detachment had begun to color her interactions with him. It wasn't that she didn't love him, she did, in a foundational, deep-rooted way. But it felt like a love for a character in a story she was observing, not living. The shared history, the inside jokes, the comfortable silences, they all felt like borrowed memories. The turning point came during a seemingly innocuous trip to the grocery store. Sarah pushed the cart down an aisle, her mind miles away, when a woman bumped into her. "Oh, I'm so sorry," the woman exclaimed, her voice light and apologetic. Sarah looked up, ready to offer a polite reassurance, and froze. The woman's eyes, a startling shade of hazel, were incredibly familiar. Not from meeting her before, but from a profound, inexplicable sense of recognition. A cascade of images flooded Sarah's mind, a sun-drenched beach, the roar of laughter, and this woman, her arms slung around Sarah's shoulder, a look of profound affection on her face. "Do I know you?" Sarah blurted out, her voice barely a whisper. The woman smiled kindly. "I don't think so. I'm Chloe. We just moved into the neighborhood." Chloe. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. This was Liam's wife, the woman Mark had been with during the swap. The memory of that night, previously tinged with shame and disappointment, now took on a sinister edge. How could she feel such a profound connection to someone she barely knew, especially someone associated with such an unsettling experience. Chloe, noticing Sarah's pale face, asked with genuine concern, "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sarah forced a smile. "Just a bit overwhelmed, I guess. Long day." She mumbled a hasty goodbye and practically fled the store, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The encounter with Chloe solidified the unsettling truth. These weren't just random flashes. They were fragments of another life, a life where Chloe wasn't a stranger met in an uncomfortable partner swap, but a friend, a confidant, a vital presence. Back home, Sarah locked herself in her study, her mind racing. She pulled out old photo albums, rifled through boxes of memorabilia, desperately searching for anything that might confirm or deny this growing sense of a parallel existence. Every picture of her and Mark, every shared souvenir, every card, screamed their life. Yet, the conviction that something was profoundly wrong only deepened. She remembered an old superstition about soul ties or twin flames, but this felt different, more like a cosmic mix-up, a celestial wrong turn. Late that night, unable to sleep, Sarah found herself staring at the ceiling. The partner swap had been a catalyst, not the cause. It was as if that single, transgressive act had somehow jarred her loose from her own reality, allowing glimpses into another. And in that other reality, she had a different husband. A different life. A different love. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Who was he? What was their life like? And why was she now experiencing these vivid, unsettling echoes? A chilling thought crept into her mind. If she was catching glimpses of another life, a life where her husband was someone else, did that mean her current husband, Mark, was also experiencing echoes of a different reality? Was he, too, feeling that subtle wrongness, that sense of a life unlived? Or was she alone in this strange, terrifying journey of discovery? The suspense tightened around her like an invisible noose. The partner swap had been meant to add spice to their lives. Instead, it seemed to have unraveled the very fabric of Sarah's existence, pulling her towards a truth that promised to redefine everything she thought she knew. The encounter with Chloe, and the chilling realization that she was a stranger in this life but a profound connection in another, propelled Sarah into a desperate quest for answers. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford, haunted as she was by fragmented memories and the persistent, nagging feeling of being an imposter in her own skin. She began to spend hours online, researching everything from quantum entanglement and parallel universes to reincarnation and soul transference. The scientific explanations felt too clinical, the spiritual ones too ethereal. Nothing quite fit the terrifyingly personal nature of her experience. She started observing Mark with a new, almost clinical intensity. Was he also experiencing these strange flashes? Did he look at her sometimes with that same flicker of unrecognition she felt for him? She looked for subtle signs, a moment of faraway contemplation, a slight hesitation in his touch, a curious glance at an object that should have been familiar. He seemed, on the surface, unchanged. His routines were the same, his gentle demeanor unwavering. Yet, the longer she watched, the more she felt a growing conviction that he, too, was adrift, perhaps unknowingly. He was a familiar shore she could no longer land on, a melody she no longer quite remembered. One evening, while they were watching a movie, Sarah decided to test the waters. "You know," she began, trying to sound casual, "that whole partner swap thing, it really messed with my head." Mark turned to her, his brow furrowed with concern. "I know, honey. I'm sorry it wasn't what you hoped for. Maybe it was a mistake." "It's not just that," Sarah continued, pushing past his placating tone. "It's like, ever since, I've had this weird feeling. Like I'm not quite in my own life." She held her breath, watching for any flicker of understanding in his eyes. He paused, then sighed. I get that, actually, he admitted, surprising her. It's like a disconnect, right? Like you looking at things through a pane of glass. He chuckled, a self-deprecating sound. I thought it was just the guilt, you know? Stepping out on us. Sarah's heart hammered. He did feel it. It's more than guilt for me, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. It's like I have memories of another life. With a different husband. A different you. Mark stared at her, his expression shifting from concern to confusion, and then to a deeply unsettling hint of fear. Sarah, what are you talking about? I don't know, she cried, frustration bubbling over. I see glimpses, Mark, of a different reality. And I feel a profound connection to someone else, a soulmate, who in this life is a stranger. She hesitated, then took the plunge. Chloe, the woman you were with. In my other life, she was my best friend. The color drained from Mark's face. He stood up, pacing the living room. Sarah, you're not making sense. Are you feeling okay? Maybe you need to see someone. His voice was gentle, but laced with a clear thread of alarm. The conversation went nowhere. He dismissed it as stress, as a vivid dream, as a psychological reaction to the partner swap. He was protective, yes, but he couldn't see what she saw, or perhaps, he refused to. The chasm between them deepened, not out of anger, but out of a terrifying inability to connect on the strange, new reality Sarah was experiencing. Despite Mark's dismissal, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that he was experiencing something similar, even if he couldn't articulate it. His slight shift in habits, his almost imperceptible moments of introspection, they weren't random. They were the subtle tremors of a reality cracking beneath his feet too. The romantic connection she felt for him, once a steady flame, now flickered uncertainly, overshadowed by a new, more potent longing for a connection she couldn't name, to a life she couldn't access. The suspense thickened, she was caught between two worlds, and the one she was currently in felt increasingly like a cage. Then came the dreams. Vivid, immersive, utterly real. In them, she was Sarah, but a different Sarah. A Sarah who laughed louder, whose eyes held a different kind of spark. And beside her was him. Not Mark. Another man. His face was always slightly out of focus, just beyond her grasp, but his presence was undeniable, a warmth, a deep understanding, a passion that resonated with her very core. They would share jokes, tender touches, and profound silences that spoke volumes. In these dreams, her heart felt complete, truly, deeply satisfied. She would wake up gasping, tears often on her cheeks, the warmth of his phantom hand still lingering in hers, the ache of loss almost unbearable. The dreams were her tether to this second life, a painful but vital link. She knew, with every fiber of her being, that the man in her dreams was her true soulmate, the husband of her alternate reality. The man she had been meant to be with. The mystery deepened. If this was her true life, why was she living this one? And who was this phantom man, this echo from another existence, who seemed to be calling to her across the cosmic divide? The initial disappointment of the partner swap now seemed trivial compared to the profound heartbreak of discovering a life she was meant to have, but had somehow lost. The suspense was no longer just about external threats, but about the very nature of her identity and destiny. She knew she had to find him, or at least, understand why he felt so inextricably linked to her. The dreams became Sarah's new reality, vivid and compelling, while her waking life felt increasingly like a fading photograph. The man in her dreams, his laugh, the way he looked at her, the effortless ease of their connection, etched himself into her consciousness. She still couldn't quite see his face with perfect clarity, as if a veil shimmered just beyond her grasp, but his presence was a tangible warmth, a longing she couldn't ignore. She knew, with an absolute certainty that transcended logic, that he was the husband of her second life. This unwavering conviction led her to a desperate act. One afternoon, while Mark was at work, she drove back to the house where the partner swap had taken place. It was a long shot, a crazy impulse, but she felt drawn there, as if the very location held a key to unlocking the full truth. The house was empty, for sale, signs planted firmly in the manicured lawn. Sarah walked around the perimeter, her heart pounding, a strange mixture of hope and dread churning within her. As she peered through a window into what she recognized as the living room, a faint shimmer caught her eye. It was almost imperceptible, a ripple in the air, like heat rising from asphalt. And then, for a split second, the room shifted. The decor changed, becoming warmer, more vibrant, filled with personal touches she instinctively recognized. A half-finished painting stood on an easel, a familiar book lay open on a coffee table, and a worn armchair looked impossibly inviting. This was it. This was a glimpse of her living room, in her other life. And as the shimmer faded, leaving the sterile, empty space of the for-sale house, a wave of profound sorrow washed over her. This was the life she was meant to have, the home she was meant to share. Later that week, a small package arrived in the mail, addressed to Mark. It was from Chloe. A note fluttered out as Mark opened it, a simple thank you for their unforgettable evening. Inside was a small, intricately carved wooden bird, a piece of folk art. Mark dismissed it as a thoughtful, if slightly odd, memento. But as Sarah's eyes fell upon it, a jolt went through her. She'd seen this bird before. In her dreams. It sat on a shelf in their alternate home, a beloved trinket. That night, as Mark slept soundly beside her, Sarah felt a profound sense of clarity, albeit a heartbreaking one. The partner swap hadn't been about sexual exploration, it had been a cosmic collision, a momentary tear in the fabric of realities, allowing souls to brush against their true counterparts. And now, armed with these unsettling truths, Sarah knew she faced an impossible choice. She could continue living this life with Mark, a life that, while comfortable and safe, now felt profoundly inauthentic, like a play she was acting in. The disconnect would likely grow, the whispers of her second life becoming louder, more insistent, pulling her further and further away from the man who lay beside her. Their love, once a solid foundation, had become a question mark. She loved Mark, she knew, but it was a love tinged with the grief of a love lost, a destiny unfulfilled. Or, she could pursue the truth, however painful, however bizarre. She could try to understand why these realities had intersected, why she was experiencing this profound sense of being displaced. It meant potentially shattering her current life, risking everything for a possibility, for a phantom love, for a life she could only glimpse in dreams and fleeting flashes. It meant facing an unknown future, alone or with a man whose face she still couldn't quite fully see, but whose presence resonated with her very soul. As dawn broke, painting the bedroom in hues of pale pink and gold, Sarah knew she couldn't go back to pretending. The weird feeling had evolved into a profound sense of purpose. The romantic yearning for the man of her dreams was intertwined with the chilling suspense of a reality gone awry. She had to understand. She had to find him, or at least, find the path to her true life. The partner swap had unlocked a door, and though the journey through it was terrifyingly uncertain, Sarah knew, with a fierce determination, that she had to step through. Her real life, her real love, awaited her on the other side. If this story of love, destiny, and parallel lives resonates with you, share your thoughts. Have you ever felt a profound connection to someone you barely knew, or had a nagging feeling that there's more to your life than meets the eye? Like, share, and subscribe for more tales that blur the lines between reality and fate.